Hello, Grip Sport fans. Welcome to show 85 of This Week in Grip, the voice of Grip Sport. We've got a great discussion planned for you today, but before we get to that, we got to cover a few things, brother. First off, safe travels to everyone coming up for Cupid's Nightmare on February 16th at Peak Strength and Fitness, 36 Main Street, Wyalusing, Pennsylvania. There's sure to be some fireworks to go down. Next, welcome aboard to the latest new members at thegripauthority.com, the world's best resource for grip strength and feats of strength instruction. Daniel Homodov, Amy Kelly, Joe Vitelli, welcome back, Pavlos Batsios, and Amanda Allen. If you're looking to take your grip to another level, join thegripauthority.com today for just $1 and access over 9 years worth of the most detailed grip training tutorials in the world, and enjoy weekly new content in 2019. Sign up today. And now, episode 85 of This Week in Grip.
Guys, well, let's get right into episode 85. We'll talk about this lockout issue that's been discussed on the grip board. I don't know what all your takes are. We've never actually talked about this, as far as I recall, Alan, and definitely James. I've never really discussed it with you, so it's going to be interesting to hear your individual takes. How about one of you just bring everybody up to speed and let everyone know exactly what we're talking about in case they haven't seen that thread on the grip board regarding lockout events.
Yeah, all right. So it was back on January 29th. Tommy Jennings posted. It was a lift from, it involved Larry Wheels and Martins Lisis. They were at a recent event. And Martins had lifted a new world record on the Saxon bar. I'm actually not sure what size that Saxon bar or anything was, but it doesn't matter. There's a video included, and it's at the Tommy has a stamp on there. It was at 27 minutes and 20-second mark where Martins made the lift, and it was a little debatable as to if his lift truly would have passed the lockout standards as what was required for that competition. As I look at it, I've watched the video a few times now, and it didn't appear to me that it was in fact actually locked out. It looked like he didn't quite meet the lockout qualifications. He even started to lose it a little bit with his left hand as he was nearing lockout. He did get the down call and returned it to the ground under reasonable control, but the lockout wasn't present. So throughout that created the great lockout or crossbar type of debate that the thread then went on for several days and pages. It's a quite lengthy discussion. A lot of the people in the know weighed in on it. The usual guys, we had Sean Kapusta, Tommy, of course. I think Luke Raymond jumped in there, Mikhail Siverson. So a lot of the people that are great with this sort of debate chimed in. Had you had a chance to go through any of this, Jedd?
Yeah, I made a post in there somewhere, and I don't remember what I said. I know at one point I said something about I see the same. Well, I don't know if I posted this or not, but I typed it out at one point, and I said I know I see the same guy a lot of times getting approved for good lifts where I would not say it was a good lift by reviewing the video. And then the other thing was we have 2 lockout lifts scheduled for our February contest, Cupid's Nightmare, which is actually next weekend. It's the 16th of February. And I'm already ready for some pushback on calls, both from the people there and people afterwards when videos come out. So, that was my initial reaction. I didn't really take a side or anything like that on what things should be, et cetera. So
yeah. I think there's a few schools of thought on this. I don't know, I scanned through it and I read some of the points. I thought Chris Rice had made a few good points. I thought Tommy made a few good points, but I also I saw that it was probably a little bit more aligned with what Luke was saying. And I don't want to take this too far in a different direction, but I kind of feel like if we're testing grip strength, then lockout should not be what we're looking for. You know what I mean? Like if we're looking for lockout, now we're introducing something that is automatically subjective. I mean, some people could say, well, you could tell with your plain eyes what a lockout is. And yet, from what we know about perspective, you could be standing at one angle and say, well, that looks like a lockout. I mean, how many times there are situations like in powerlifting where all of the judges do not agree, right? Because where they're standing, the lockout doesn't look like a lockout, and where someone else is, it does. And, we could come up with a definition of what a lockout is, and we could try to stay with the letter of the law. But then somebody could pull something to what looks like lockout from our perspective and not from somebody else's perspective. And certainly they had the grip strength to lift it and to hold it under control for some time. And yet we want to argue about, and maybe the controversy is a good thing. I don't know, maybe it just brings more people into the sport. Not for me personally. But my thing has always been, why not try to reduce subjectivity? So reduce the chance of subjectivity, and one of the ways that you can do that, to me, is with a crossbar.
I agree.
Thoughts? Yeah.
I totally agree.
Yes, I do.
I totally agree with that. Now, the point that I'm going to throw out there is this. The idea of lockout comes from basically the deadlift in powerlifting and the bench press in powerlifting.
This is not powerlifting.
Let's say lockout comes from powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting. I can't think of another. I can't honestly think of another strength sport besides grip where lockout is used. Can you guys think of anything? Are there any other lockouts? I mean, aside from like OSHA regulations at Allen's plant where he works, you gotta lock that stuff out. But aside from that, we're basically looking at powerlifting and Olympic weightlifting, and I'm not even sure that they consider. I can't think of a clean and jerk being called lockout, but I guess it is lockout. But here's the deal. The powerlifting uses a bar that is not that much of a test of your grip strength. It's certainly not a test where you need to recruit tension from other muscles that are upwards of 2, maybe more joints away from your hands.
Yeah.
You're lifting your maximal weight on an axle or on a rolling thunder or a Saxon bar or anything like that. If you're truly recruiting all the possible strength that contributes to grip strength, then you've got tension going on in muscle groups and joints that are nowhere near the bar, including including the shoulders. And some people, when they're recruiting all that musculature, are front-loaded. They're anteriorly loaded, meaning they flex harder in the pec than they do the upper back. So what that does is that automatically pulls their shoulders forward, and it's virtually impossible for those people to reach what is considered a true lockout by definition of the deadlift in powerlifting. So it's almost, it's not, I don't want to say it's impossible, but because of the way people recruit muscle fibers and activate joints, it becomes seriously difficult to reach that lockout position as defined by shoulders back. The knee, the hip are not necessarily too difficult, but it's the shoulder the shoulder point of lockout that becomes so hard, and because grip sport lifts involve such tension where you're pulling your shoulders forward a lot of times, it makes lockout very, very difficult to even attain, let alone for someone to judge it, because you might have 10 different competitors that all lock out 10 different ways, and you got one judge. Where's that judge at? Is he down on the floor when everybody else is lifting on a stage 3 feet up? That can really distort everything too. So
absolutely.
So
can I give a little context to that, actually?
Yeah, absolutely.
This is going back 15 plus years ago, and I was refereeing an arm wrestling tournament, and this goes towards sort of the subjectivity of reffing as well. The one thing I learned from arm wrestling is you undergo a whole bunch of fatigue, especially if you're one of the only head refs at an event, and you're there for 8 hours match after match.
Yep.
You're going to miss things, and you might even prematurely call things. And it's not intentional, but it does increase the level of subjectivity. So I was at an event. It was called it was in Manhattan, the Columbus Avenue Street Festival. And it was the last match of the overall competition. And I had no complaints about my reffing the whole day. So it's this long hook match, and this guy from Long Island, Dan Cerise, hits into this really fast shoulder roll hook move, and I could see, because I was at the level of the pin line, I could see the guy's wrist dip below it just for a split second, right? So I call a match. Now, this guy, who was a competitor from Poland, and his guys who were filming it start flipping out. And people are booing, and there used to be a lot of people at this thing. And I guess, they thought I had prematurely called the match. Now, the video didn't do me any favors, but here's the issue. The video was shot from above. So if you shoot an arm wrestling video from above, it's very difficult if you don't hit the pad, for it to look like a pin. So it looked like there wasn't a pin at all, So it just created this controversy that I would have loved to have eliminated, So referee fatigue, if you have a judge, for example, they can be fatigued after watching lifts all day, okay? And I'm going to tell you, I've had events where I've made very few mistakes, and then afterwards people said, oh my gosh, you're a great ref. And then I've had events that I thought I reffed even better, and then made maybe one mistake that I missed, and had to read about how awful I was,
right,
on an arm wrestling message board after that, and how I had no business, refereeing. So reducing subjectivity, I think, should be the goal, and I think what you're saying, especially about two-hand lifts and muscles, recruiting muscles away from the hands, it's like, at what point do we stop testing grip strength? You know what I mean? And at what point does it become a hand size or, a body strength lift? And I think, those are other things that are subject to debate. Like, for example, are two-hand lifts good for grip sport? What do you think?
Well, I think so. I do.
You do?
I like them. I like having the two-hand lifts. Yeah, the axle and the two-hand row. And, yep.
Yeah, and see, that's the thing. It's like, it's fine to say, that's the case, and you can certainly have events with two-hand lifts. If you have events with two-hand lifts, you're probably not going to have crossbars, though, right?
Well, with the Euro, we definitely do.
Well, yeah, with the Euro, you're right. I'm sorry about that. Yeah, but with the axle or the Saxon, for example, you're not going to have a crossbar.
Right. At least we don't have anything like that at present. Yes.
Well, I don't want Alan to get skipped here. I think we kind of bridged into a different topic. Alan.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. I just want to keep things flowing smoothly. Alan, what is your initial thoughts, on the idea of lockout in competition?
I don't personally care for it in competition. because I think there's just a lot of human error involved. There's so many things going on at one time. I don't think it's easy to catch everything, and I think we eliminate a lot of that with the crossbar. It's a separate thing, but if you talk about it from a one-handed lift point of view, if you use like a rolling handle and you're judging it to lockout, you got to make sure the hand's centered, make sure there's no tilt, and then you've got to look at all of those other things in conjunction with it. You're looking at, 6 foot of person from a few feet away. You're checking for all of these things at one time. And to me, eliminating the entire lockout portion of it and just making it literally about the lift, that's something you can see in a very narrow window and actually watch it happen. You don't have to be focused on so many of those other things when an issue could be happening elsewhere. A guy might have something locked out, but the rolling handle implement could be severely tilted. I think you're missing the critical part of it when you're looking at those things.
That's a great point.
And I also agree with with all the other things going on when you lift stuff. I mean, I don't know about you personally, but you definitely hear this from people once in a while. Weird things like even like straining their neck on some of these lifts from some of this different tension and misalignments and things that go on. And I absolutely agree with, not being able to necessarily pull your shoulders back correctly when those things are going on. You even watch some of the involuntary things that seem to happen to people when they're doing, one-handed lifts. Their other hand is often doing some weird little funky thing off to the side. You got so many things going on. It's hard to kind of pull it all together like that, Yeah. So I personally I like the crossbar. I think it's worked the best. We only had a few competitions run at my place that way, but that's made it easy. There's no question when you hit it.
Yeah,
it's my preference.
I honestly didn't see any real good arguments against the crossbar, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know what you guys thought about that, but when I was reading just through the thread, I saw people say, "Oh, it looks wimpy" or whatever, and it's like, well, be a little more secure in your manhood. Don't worry about how it looks. You know what I mean? If we're trying to really measure, grip strength, then why would somebody like a Brian Hunsaker, and I'm not saying Brian would even complain about this because I doubt that he would, but why would someone like a Brian Hunsaker who's 6'92" have to pull something, 9 feet further than somebody like, a Darren Shallman or something, or someone like me? At least if you have a crossbar, everyone is pulling at the same distance, and I'm sure some people could say, well, you're pulling at a greater length of your body. And then other people could say, well, you're pulling at a greater length of your body, but the taller person has to bend down more. So it's at least everyone is pulling the weight the same distance. I guess I think that's a good argument for a crossbar.
I saw the issue about the crossbar, and I can't remember the specific wording on it, but it was basically the dislike for it. Was because it made it seem like an abbreviated lift. But you watch some people do some of these things, and I swear I've seen Rolling Thunder lifts. I'm not picking on the Rolling Thunder here, but I've seen Rolling Thunder lifts where those things barely look like they broke off the ground, and it's locked out, right? It's like literally doesn't look more than a few inches at best.
Well, dude, all I have to do is take a sumo stance where my feet are 6 feet apart, and that's exactly all I have to do.
And is that? How is that? That's no better. That's no better than what we're doing. With bringing things to the crossbar, how we see it in grip sport. It if anything, it makes our lift greater. A taller lift. Use the crusher for example. That's a 6-inch lift. There's just no question. I think that method for judging purposes in competition is by far superior.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I do know some people were against the aesthetics of the crossbar. I did read some of that, but it's paint some flames on the crossbar or something.
So James, when you say that the people that were displeased with the crossbar, without going into names, are these people that actually compete in grip competitions, or are they people that
I didn't even get the names
videos every so often?
I didn't even get the names of the people that were. I was just pretty much looking at the points, and then if I saw a point that I thought was pretty good, I would look at the name. But I wasn't. It was pages and pages long. So I wasn't going to, like, study it. I talked
Sure.
to the guys about the topic yesterday, and, you know, they all seem to agree that, you know, hitting a crossbar is probably the fairest and most objective way to do it. You know, I mean, it's sort of like some of the rules for people, like, say, lifting the inch or something to lock out. You know, I always joke with those guys. You know, the first time I lift the inch, I don't care if the damn thing is tilted. I'm going to lift it up to a height where I have control of it. I'm going to put it down. I don't care if my shoulder is pulled back. I just want to lift the damn thing off the ground. And if people accept it, great. If they don't, well, that's fine too. It's not about them accepting it. Because, you know, I watch some people who lift the inch to lockout, and it's like, man, I don't know, a bell that size hitting you in the junk, it just doesn't seem like a good time to me, you know.
Yeah. But you're acknowledging it as a different thing. You know, that's what separates it apart for me. You know, it's when people, I think, call things a lockout that's not a true saying using the inch analogy, for example. Lifting the inch would be a different thing than, you know, lifting it to lockout, you know, and I think that's how you're separating it there. You know, you're calling it it's a different thing, and that being acknowledged, I think, makes that legitimate.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing is, I think. Well, go ahead, Jedd. Say what you're going to say.
One thing I was going to say is, I think Randall Strawson made a point there in that thread about judging, and it's like, I hope it was him that said it. Someone said something about, like, the judge has to be willing to say no. There was no lift. And
well, sure.
And I agree with that. Like there's more to judging than just picking your hand up and setting it down, you know, waving it down and saying good lift or whatever. Like you gotta have a sack on you in order to run a contest with lockout. And
absolutely.
And that's all fine and dandy, but, like, the fact of the matter is there's been more controversial calls on lifts that have come out of that camp than any other you know, region of sports. Like the California arm lifting grip contests, whatever you want to call it, have produced the most controversial lifts that have ever been done. Part of it has to do, yes, with the fact that there's been more of those types of events held there in contests of that nature in California. But if you look at the lifts that have taken place there and then have been considered controversial afterwards, it's like they're coming all out of the same competitions with the same judges. And and even I would even go to say that it's like if you look at the lockout calls for both Axel and Rolling Thunder, and throw in there Crush to Dust, the same guys constantly get that wrong, and they're constantly, you know, nitpicked. So to me, is that judge? But I guess what I'm saying is, does the judge really not have the balls to say no lift? I don't think that's the case, because I've met the guy.
Either.
I've met the guy that makes those calls. I just think it's just virtually impossible for him to really tell whether or not that lifter or those lifters even have hit lockout, because you can't tell, because lockout looks different for everybody. The other thing I want to, well, I've got another point to make. I don't want you to jump right into it. Does anyone want to respond to that one right there about, you know, that I just said?
I think there's pressures
do.
too. Well, do you want to go first? You can go first, Alan.
Okay. Well, just with regards to what Jedd was saying about that specific venue, we did see, we'd seen where a person not long ago had done a certain cert, and he was given the down calls on this and everything. And upon his review later on, he disallowed his certification to go through. It was something that was going to get submitted. And upon him personally reviewing the video, he decided that it wasn't up to the standards that either he himself or that the certifying company would have allowed. So this goes along. Like I said, I'm not naming names here. People can go back to and do the digging if they want to, and they might.
And that was very commendable when that happened. I thought that was the right the right choice to make.
Absolutely, that was a stand-up thing to do. Yeah,
yep.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
In fact, there was a questionable call made at the NAGS Championship in 2012 where the lifter just contacted me this past week and asked for that lift to be taken down because that person never liked that lift and always disliked the fact that it got credited with a world record and asked for it to be taken down because they just couldn't handle it anymore and wish they would have asked a long time ago. I think it's commendable when the video comes out and it's very obvious to them that it's not a proper lift, and then they say, you know what, this isn't a proper lift. Let's just take it off the list because I don't like it. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's commendable when athletes admit to that.
Yeah, and I think another thing comes into play when you're judging something. It's like it might even be a subconscious thing where the judge themselves might have a little unchecked bias they're not aware of, and it could be a good or a bad thing. I've certainly seen it from arm wrestling referees where there's they're either giving their teammate favoritism and overlooking fouls, or they're actually, like in this case of a Steve Stanaway, he's judging his teammates as a referee harder because he doesn't want to be accused of favoritism.
Yeah. That's what what Luke and I just talked about today. Like we gotta make sure that any call that's made at this contest coming up is like without question the right call. Like get your lockout there, wait for the down call because it's just going to lead to anything less than the right call is going to lead to a bunch of nitpicking. Period.
Sure.
So
sure.
And his posture is weird and his freaking delts are so big, like even those factors make it weird.
Yeah.
It's like I hate to have to suggest this, but are 3 judges needed for every lockout lift that you do?
Ugh.
And if that's the case, in order to get the right call, doesn't it just make more sense to make lifts, either a 6, 7.5, or whatever height pole, with a crossbar? Doesn't it just make more sense to do it that way?
To me, yes. Yeah. I mean, because again, it's reducing subjectivity. I mean, I can remember driving home from the Nationals one time with Robert Miller and him, being upset with me because I fouled him out in the finals, but his elbow came up off the pad.
Yeah.
And it's like, I wish there was a laser or some kind of machine or sensor that could tell people when there was a pin or a foul or something like that. If that was the case, it would remove human error. I think in grip we have a chance to actually do that with the crossbars to eliminate as much human error as possible,
right.
So that you don't have to have a judge stand there who is often the same person putting on a competition, right? And here they are, they put all this effort into putting on a competition, and then they make a call that maybe someone doesn't like, and it's like, you feel like you can't win for losing, It's like, so having a crossbar, I think, eliminates all of that. I mean, it doesn't have to be a crossbar situation where it makes it look like just a terrible partial lift. I mean, to me, it's been the contrary. When I've seen guys do one-hand Euro, for example, or crusher, it doesn't look to me like a partial lift when they hit that crossbar.
Right.
It certainly doesn't feel like a partial lift.
No, man. Hell no. There's a lot of effort that goes into it, and in I would say probably 90% of the cases, legal lifts on a crossbar, people actually pull it much higher than the crossbar and sometimes even get close to lockout, or at least as close as you can. It's really tough to lock out like a one-hand pinch on a Euro because the weights are loaded laterally versus vertically. So so that's a real good point. Almost never do you have a crossbar lift where you have to say, man, I think that hit the crossbar. Let's review the video just to make sure, or something like that. That's like one out of how many pulls in it might happen once in each contest where we have to like say, man, I thought that it sounded like it hit the crossbar, but we're not sure.
Yeah.
It's almost always super, super obvious. So how many how many tough calls are there with lockout out of the total number of lifts, and then how many tough calls are there with crossbars versus the total number of lifts. The percentage is, I'm sure, much lower still, once again, of questionable calls with the crossbar versus lockout.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think. Well, go ahead, Alan.
No, I agree with that completely. It's just from what we've seen, there's been very little controversy ever with any of the crossbar lifts versus the lockout. Worst case, there's been times when, for example, sometimes just the way physics play into things, the crossbar, it can be difficult for it to come in contact with the with our apparatus, and the lifter still clearly pulls to a height where you can see it travel above the minimum lift. Mm-hmm. So we have that secondary feature built in there. It's a very, very easy and straightforward thing.
Yep.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing that sorry.
Nope. I was just going to say something in agreement. Go ahead.
What I was going to say is the other thing that I think, maybe is subjective is whether or not somebody followed a lift down with control. So it's do we decide that someone hits the crossbar, and once they do, as long as they're holding on to the apparatus and they put it down, that it's a lift? Or do they have to, or do we introduce the subjectivity of control? Yeah. As I think it was maybe it was Union Mahonen who had pinched 55's his first submission, and it didn't get passed because he had locked him out, and clearly locked him out, and he was holding him. And then he went to put him down, and it looked like there was a little bit of slippage, but he followed it to the ground.
And
that
was crap.
There was argument over whether or not it was a good lift.
Yeah, he did it to the letter.
Sure, and it's like if someone follows it to the ground, it's like, I don't know. It just seems to me like if the rule was you had it under control until you hit the bar, and then you followed it to the ground, legitimately with your hand or hands on whatever it is, then it's a lift.
In contact is what you're saying.
Because if you introduce too much subjectivity, it starts to become like what is and what isn't a catch in the NFL.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, in talking about Uni's lift, that was gigged on a technicality. That was some nitpicky nonsense is what it was. He picked that thing up, dominated it, held it a little longer than he needed to. He held it forever at the top. And showboated almost, if you will. And then started to lose it, and then got it to ground quick. He did it one way or the other. That was legit, and he just got pinched for nothing.
Funny is I have absolutely no recollection of this feat that you guys are talking about.
That stuck in my mind because it forever pissed me off. It was just stupid crap. Yeah. He did it, and even though he still followed the letter of the rule on it. Yeah. One way or the other, and that's what drove me nuts about that thing. Seeing legit lifts, seeing that sort of lift fail when it should have got passed, and then seeing the vice versa. That's what gives me a bad taste. Yeah.
That's that kind of thing, dude. Like when I'm lifting in a competition on a crossbar lift, like I'm pushing that weight back down as fast as I can.
That's what I do.
And on something like a flask where everything's tight and you'll feel the recoil in your hand if you slam it down too hard. Like I would be a proponent of allowing people to open their hand up, and as long as their palms still remain in contact, screw the fingers and thumb, because it's too easy to get hurt. When you do have one of those things where maybe the plate hits at an angle or something where the implement bounces or something like that, that area of your thumb is so prone to bruising, and like I don't know if it's nerves that go through there and get bruised or whatever, but like I've tweaked my thumb doing that, returning stuff to the ground like that, and had to deal with that for months at a time. And I'm not trying to propose a rule change necessarily, but if it ever came up, I would be in support of being able to open up your hand on certain things so you don't get hurt.
It still follows control, in my opinion.
Yeah, we're talking about, this is a sport that is different from all the other strength sports that are out there, and eventually someone's going to get hurt pretty severely on a flask or something like that, where you've got to maintain contact with the floor. And thankfully, anytime that I've been doing the flask, I've had mostly like pretty clear-cut, easy pulls and returns to the floor. But like I've seen some things where it like hits and it goes all like cockeyed back and forth I mean, different angles, things like that, and it's really it's scary to imagine what could happen to someone's thumb, especially, on a lift like that. So
well, that crap bounces.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if everybody necessarily realizes that, but when you lift something, especially if it's at a max effort and you're bringing it down, and when you're trying to get something down quick and maintain control, there's some rebound effect on that. And I've personally jammed fingers and jacked up my thumb joint, and that shit takes forever to get better. You think it's so long, you think it's not going to improve.
Contact like that, you're dealing with that for months. To get it back, you're dealing with it for months, and you feel it every time you take an attempt. So,
absolutely. Yeah, I think it's from the preservation point of view, that's a good thing to adopt, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess one of my questions is like, and this might be controversial, but is the whole idea of lockout, is it in some way to get more credibility from the powerlifting community or the Olympic lifting community? Is that like in the back of people's minds when they're a proponent of lockout, do you think?
Well, I think you could. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But my opinion is that on things like Axel and Rolling Thunder, when those were, as far as I know, those were the first grip events that were contested, and they had to have some kind of a finishing point. And there was no height gauge involved at that point in grip. So I don't know what the rules were, but they were probably thinking, well, in powerlifting, when you're deadlifting something, you go to lockout. So it probably just was a spillover from that. But I can tell you this, and this is the other point that I was going to bring up earlier, but I decided to wait. So my first competition was in 2003, grip competition. Before that, I only know of, there were competitions that David Horn has documented over the years that were considered grip contests in, in England, United Kingdom, Europe, stuff like that. But in the United States, the only contests that I know of prior to September of 2003 were taking place in Minnesota under Jeff Peterson and Dave Oslin, that group out there, and then Matt Graham, which I can't remember right now, but I want to say he was in Idaho. I think he ran a couple contests prior to Rick Walker's 2003 competition, and then the Iron Mine competitions involving Axel and Rolling Thunder, and I don't even know what kind of format they were run on back in the day. But so I guess the point I'm trying to make is the first contest that I did was very early on in the development of grip as a sport, and Rick Walker had everything that I recall. We had to lift it 6 inches off the ground. There was a yardstick that someone was holding right beside the lifter, and then the judge was laying on his freaking side, on his shoulder and ear, watching to make sure the bottom of the implement reached the 6-inch height. So very early on in all this, there was no consideration of lifting something to lockout. It was pulling it to a certain height, because I think the idea of lockout is to show that you maintain control over the implement for a defined amount of time and distance, primarily distance, but there's a time factor involved there. So, the lifts that I can recall from Battle for Grip Supremacy in September 2003 were 2-hand pinch done on 45-pound plates, and then a thick-handled dumbbell with that was plate loaded. Both of them were 6-inch lifts, because you can't lift the 2-hand pinch to lockout unless it's front loaded, because you have implements, or you have plates loaded on the implement on the back side of the pipe, so there's no possible way you can lock that out unless the pipe is 10 feet long and you don't load any weight, very close to the implement at all. It's impossible. So we went with I had nothing to do with it. Rick decided it was 2 inches for a pull. So it's not like this shit just got started last week with this with height gauges and height indicators and, just a plain, 6-inch demand. This is stuff that's going all the way back to 2003, and it's comparable in time to the amount of time that was used for the iron mine lifts. And as I recall, the two-hand pinch lift in Europe, under David Horn's watchful eye, it had something to do with the relationship of the center of the plates to the height of the knee, just like in a similar nature to the one-hand deadlift, either straddle or overhand lift, where the bar had to come to knee height. So a lot of these grip lifts, the actual history is not done to lockout. They're partial lifts done under control, where you lift to a certain height relative either to a measuring device or the lifter's body. So, it's not something that just came along yesterday. It's something that's been going on for a long, long time.
It seems to me, too, that, grip, the sport should do its own thing. It should be unique. And if it's evolving to the point where, maybe we have to decide a standardized height for different events, I think that's a good thing. I mean, I think, again, I've said this word a lot, but it further eliminates subjectivity and standardizes rules, which is, let me tell you, one of the biggest problems the sport of arm wrestling has had over the decades that I've been involved in it is the lack of standardized equipment. You go to a tournament and you almost have to guess the height of the table rather, at some points. You didn't even know what strap you were going to have to use, at some events, to, trying to gradually get to a point where, all events had standard size tables, standard rules, rather than rules from one of 4 or 5 different organizations. So it's like if you can narrow that down and eliminate that subjectivity and the guesswork and just really start to standardize rules and heights, you're going to be, I think, you're going to be doing your own thing, because grip will be different than, powerlifting or Olympic lifting, and, you're going to have a level of standardization that I think is going to remove so much controversy and subjectivity. So, just my opinion.
Yeah. And in reflection of that, in my opinion, I don't have a problem necessarily with some stuff being 6 inches and some 7.5. I don't.
Sure.
That's not something that I really care about. You know what I mean? But it probably would be easier. I know it's frustrating for new promoters to have to dig through and figure out whether it's 6 inches, 7.5, or lockout. But that's where I always invite people to just ask if they're unsure, because most of that stuff I have dedicated to memory. But
I actually don't understand some of that, because I don't think it's that hard to determine some of these measuring heights that we have. I think it's rather elementary, really, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
6 inches, 7.5 inches. These are not. It's not like 7 and 13. 30 seconds or something like that. These are round numbers, if you will. You can find them very easy with a standard ruler. It's not hard to get the crossbars set up. I really don't think it's that difficult. That's certainly an easier task than judging a proper lockout.
Right.
Apparently.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I'm with you, Alan. I'm with you, buddy.
And I would think, to take things a step farther, I would think even coming up with an apparatus to have a lift to height for things like the axle and the Saxon bar is not something that'd be hard to figure out. We got a number of talented guys in this stuff. Gil Gooden and, Luke Raymond.
Yeah.
They can figure something out.
Aaron Corcoran,
any of them. Pick your guy. It's not that hard.
Yeah.
And then it makes it repeatable.
Lasers in his garage or something that.
Well, he probably has a prototype already, I would imagine. He just hasn't released it yet. But it's not. That's really not. It's not that complicated. To me, it doesn't even require a person of Aaron's intelligence to come up with something like that. It's not a hard thing to do. It's just another setup on the other side, and you just the ends of the bar would hit a crossbar. You know what I'm saying? I don't really see it as an issue. it's maybe a little bit more of an expense, but it makes everything repeatable, and then there's no debate later on.
Yeah.
You know you hit it, you know it's level, you know all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And it would certainly not necessarily even be an abbreviated lift. It could still be something that would approach lockout or pull it beyond. It wouldn't look short by any means. It just gives you a reliable way of actually making sure you attain something that everybody else did that's doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have the same, we're requiring people to use the same pieces of equipment. You know, we might as well keep that theme. You know, you're not letting one guy pull a world record on the Apollon's axle and another guy pulling a record on the Rogue axle and getting recognized for the same thing because it's different, right? Mm-hmm. I think this way it gives you some continuity almost, if you will. It's the same. You know, it's a true apples to apples comparison in my mind.
Yep.
Sounds good to me.
What do you think, this is kind of a different topic, but what do you guys think about the call that was made for King Kong this year with the Little Bighorn only being a 6-inch pull?
Okay, I was speculating. I wrote that down because I wanted to bring it up. I thought 6 inches would fit because that's what it was for the jug last year. Mm-hmm. But I didn't see where they indicated that online yet.
You didn't see where they indicated what? A 6-inch pull?
Yeah, for the anvil. I missed that part. I thought they were going to hash that out later on.
Oh, I thought I read that it was a done deal, but I couldn't tell you where I read it from.
Oh, that could be that they'd already hashed it out. I know they listed the preliminary events, which I guess as long as we're heading down this road, we're going to be the Flask, the Dub Hub, the Crusher, and the Iron Mind Little Bighorn anvil. But we all know in the past that the Little Bighorn had always been a lockout lift, and they're now doing it to height. But I was curious what that was actually going to be. I went back and looked at the rules from last year to see, and that was going to be my guess.
Not that I'll be at King Kong, but I'm certainly a proponent of the idea, personally.
Yeah. I think 6 inches, I like that. I think that height's legit. You know, I never personally, this isn't a slam against the V-bar, but that, 2-inch lift was always weird for me, personally. Kind of awkward to even see it really good, but but the 6-inch lift I think fits. It worked good for the Crusher, I thought, or not the Crusher, excuse me, for the jug last year. You know, it was still it looked like a lengthy lift, and I think it fits.
Cool. Now, what about the record keeping? I mean, you can't lump that in with all the lockout lifts, right?
No, definitely not. Definitely not. This would have to be its own standalone thing.
Yeah.
Yep. But I think it has a lot more credibility.
It's going to be easier to judge.
Well, and we haven't seen we haven't seen the poor judging that I'm aware of on some of the Little Bighorn lifts. I remember Cody Burns, for example, when he pulled the world record, and Andrew Pankey judged that. I mean, that was good judging. If anybody had seen that lift when he pulled that record, he pulled it up, held it. It was good. A great lift, and the judging was on point. That was perfect. That's what you'd like to see from all of this stuff.
Yeah,
and but hitting the crossbar.
And I would be eager to see what the difference is in terms of poundage, because I really don't think it's going to be a huge difference between a 6-inch lift. You think so?
Well, without the pause at lockout, I think we're going to see a little bit higher because nobody needs to hold it up there now. I would think, ripping it off the ground, hitting that bar, and being able to dump it back. I would think we'd see a higher number, but I don't. I guess we'll have to see. I'm not going to be pulling anything impressive on it.
Personally, I think we'll see some definite higher numbers. And I'm thinking at least. For me personally, I think it would probably result in at least a 20-pound increase personally for me. Just because I know I can break stuff off the ground 4 to 6 inches that on days that I don't have even a chance of locking it out. So on a bad day, I can pull 20 pounds more 6 inches than I can lock out. So that's just my opinion, but.
I haven't played with it, but that was always my struggle too with the Little Bighorn. Is it felt like a huge difference for what I could hop off the ground, for example, the lockout. It was tremendous. So I guess we'll find out.
Right.
Yeah, and I think maybe it's almost comparable to, certing on grippers, if you think about it. When you go to a credit card, it doesn't make the people who certed on the 3 prior to the credit card rule obsolete per se, right? But it's almost like a different set of rules, and maybe they should be, separated.
Yeah, I always thought they should have just restarted the list with that credit card stuff, man, because now we're at the point where people don't even realize that you used to be able to cert a different way. So viewers on my YouTube channel think I can credit card set of 3 any day of the week because I'm on the certification list for 15 years. And I'm like, no, dude. The cert has changed so much, it's not even funny. The grippers have changed so much. I mean, and people don't realize it. So I always thought that they should have had a different list.
At least you can identify that line in there. You can see where it used to be hundreds of people seemingly a year would cert on it, and all of a sudden it was like 10. You know what I'm saying? It was a huge drop-off when they went to that. But I think that's a natural evolution of this, if you find a system that's not working, or it's even being cheated, if you will, then things need to be modified to make things more uniform and give you that consistency.
I mean, I would maybe argue that the credit card doesn't make things uniform, but I would say that it certainly makes it more difficult, and it introduces a standard. I mean, I think like a GHP block, for example, would be a better measurement or a better standard. If you were to go to, say, somewhere between 20 and, I don't know, what is the wide side of a GHP block in millimeters? Do you guys know offhand?
Dude, for some reason I want to say 30 or an inch and a half, 30 millimeters.
Yeah, I think it's
a half.
Yeah. So if you go in between that range, I mean, sure, you still have to have the chest and shoulder strength to set the gripper, but at least you don't have to have the giant hand size, essentially. Like
I was meaning more like it was a consistent thing, though, whereas somebody could practically.
No, I know what you were driving at.
Yeah.
So that it wasn't one of those things where you could set the thing almost closed, like in a Mash Monster set, and then just squeeze it that little bit, kind of thing.
Yes.
And then have a still photo of it or something, like it used to be.
Right. Because I think with that sort of consistency, it eliminates the need where we've seen some of these lifts even get taken back. I mean, we've seen a number of records get removed and rolled back to the previous record. And I think with something like that, it eliminates that, and a lot of these things would be longer standing, or they would never lose their legitimacy.
Yeah.
I think just returning to the first topic, So it's almost like, and this is maybe the thing that I don't like about the conversation about Martin's Leasis. It's like, here's this guy who, pulls this great number on the Saxon bar, and it's like, it's almost like the fact that he was able to take that much weight and pull it up gets overlooked now. And now it's like people are questioning his integrity, and he should, give the record back, kind of thing.
I don't think anybody should question his integrity, because it looked to me like he knew damn well it wasn't a very good quality.
I was going to say the same thing. He was
like
almost a little in disbelief, it seemed to me. Yep.
Yeah.
Sure, but I guess
completely.
what gets overlooked, though, and I think this is the point, is that that's a pretty goddamn awesome lift. You know what I mean?
Well, that definitely gets overlooked a little bit there. Yes.
Yeah,
and that was an impressive lift.
Yeah. It since it's not locked out, it's like instead of people wanting to say, damn man, that was awesome, nice work, it's you didn't lock it out, and if you had any integrity, you'd give it back, kind of thing. Like the whole Mike Burke axle thing. And yeah, I mean that's been a controversy for how long now, the Mike Burke axle thing?
Since it happened, I don't even know when it took place, but it's been a long-standing thing. Yeah.
Has it been 5 years at this point?
I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I don't even remember actually either. I just remembered seeing that video from from quite a while back.
Yeah. Well, that's all I got on it, guys. I don't know about you guys.
I guess I've said the points that I wanted to. So, how about you, Alan?
No, I did too. I guess I didn't know that we were all going to be in agreement based on our initial that initial thing on Facebook. I actually thought, James, you were going to head a different direction entirely.
well, you know, so. I'm sort of radical in the notion that, you know, I mean, I feel like testing grip strength is testing individual hand strength and you know, having an adjustable type pinch and an adjustable type thick bar and heck, even maybe even having a gripper that has handles that are, you know, an equivalent length apart that you don't have to set if we're really testing grip strength to try to, again, in terms of subjectivity, eliminate hand size and body size, you know, because I think Jedd put it best in his description of let's say lifting an axle. I mean, obviously you could have, you know, 8.5-inch hands or 9-inch hands, and an axle is going to feel a lot more comfortable in your hands, and you're going to be able to pull away bigger number than somebody who's got a 7-inch hand, for example. You know, and it's not to say that person has a stronger hand. It's just that 2-inch axle feels like what would feel like a 3+ inch axle to the person with the bigger hand. So like I've said before, like, you know, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I do 2-hand pinch training, I mean, it feels like other things get sore rather than my hands, you know, like my lower back and my rhomboids and stuff, you know, things that you wouldn't think would get sore, you know, training grip, you know, whereas I know for a fact there are guys who can 2-hand pinch considerably more than me that I could, you know, pinch one hand more than. And I'm not sitting here saying, well, my pinch is better or my hands are stronger. I'm just saying, I guess if I was going to test hand strength, I'd want to take away the size element as much as I could and make it individual hand lifts so that we were eliminating some of the body strength elements that Jedd was talking about earlier. Does that make sense? And it doesn't mean that you guys have to agree with it, because like you guys said, you like 2-hand lifts, and that's cool. You know, it's just I think if I
see your point of view.
Events, yeah, I think if I was going to put on events, it would be, you know, one-handed lifts where maybe the different apparatus were adjustable, you know, or set at a fixed width in the case of grippers. Even though Jason hates that idea, because I've brought that up to Jason before, and he's like, no, we're using a block set. Setting a gripper is part of the close, he says to me. So, but I get it. I get that. You know, and it's cool. I mean, we could disagree on that.
No, I definitely understand your point there. Yeah, that eliminates it. That's where like grippers choker to parallel, for example, would be a better test maybe for for the crushing part of it. Yep. Yeah.
And I just think it would be interesting to see, you know, how that would change things. You know, it's like Andrew's putting on Legends, right?
Yeah.
And that's coming up this year. And the axle size is what, 2 3/8 or something?
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I'm not saying I'm a legend, because I'm not. I mean, both of you guys have been doing this longer than me. But 2 3/8 inch axle, I'm out. You know, sorry guys, I'm out.
No, I hear what you're saying there, dude. That's
yeah.
That's a big
I have one and I can't do anything with it. Yeah. Yeah. To the point where I don't use it much. I'm so unhappy with the performance on it. Yeah. It definitely feels huge. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's something to be said for sure for the guys that do have the smaller hands that don't mind going in those competitions. And you know, so for sure, but I'm just thinking, like, if we're really looking for the strongest hands, we would standardize the equipment in a way so that the size would be a limiting factor, I guess. But if we're looking for the biggest, strongest hands, then we should keep doing what we're doing. Make sense?
That you said a mouthful there, bro.
Well, I don't know if you guys agree with it or not, and it's okay if you don't. I'm I'm sure there are going to be people who disagree with what I just said, and that's cool. I think that makes for interesting debate.
No, I do like your point about that. I definitely get it. It's just when it comes to like the grip stuff and the size of implements, you know, the one thing is I can't do anything about my hand size, but I can do things about like my training and ways to try to get stronger. So I kind of disregard like the hand size component of it. I'm born that way. That's what I got. That's what I got to work with, you know. So I really don't even give it another thought or even use it as an excuse. I'm either strong enough or not. That's kind of my approach. You know, I do acknowledge that larger hands are definitely a benefit to some things, but it's like I can't fix it. You know, there's nothing I can do about it. But everything else is something I can manipulate to a degree. Yeah. And if I never advanced to that level, it's just because I wasn't good enough or strong enough or something. You know, that's my viewpoint. But then again, my hands are average, so somebody with smaller ones may have a different opinion of it. But that's my thought anyway.
And here's the thing, you know, I don't want people to think that this is about me because I have small hands, because I think most people who know me know that I go to events once in a while, but it's like 1 or 2 a year, and it's really just a fun time for me to get away. Do I want to hit my PRs at events? Yeah, I do. But I'm not looking to like be the King Kong of grip or anything. It's not for me. I'm just looking at it totally from the perspective of the people who maybe would like to compete, you know, and be at that level and might have smaller hands that are just as strong as the bigger guys with bigger hands, but they'll never be able to prove it on a 2 3/8 inch axle, I guess. You know what I'm saying? So it eliminates a lot of the people on the periphery who might be able, strength-wise, to compete with the guys with the bigger hands.
Yeah. And I mean that could have a factor of with the number of sign-ups that they're getting for the competition.
It does.
You know,
I see something that says 2 3/8 inch axle, and me, Jason, and Bob are like, nah, I don't think we're making the trip. Actually, Bob would probably do it anyway, you know, because, you know, Bob's got a chip on his shoulder about being a little man, so I could see Bob going anyway. But you know, we're just sort of like, whatever.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, we'll find an event that's got different lifts that we like better, and we'll go to that kind of thing.
There's nothing wrong with that either. So
yeah,
is that, not to go a different way, James, but if the competition was closer by though, would you consider it? Is that only part of that, or it's just the traveling like halfway across the country to do it? But for me, because I'm on board with you that way, but then again, if it was like just the next town over, I would go whether I was seriously outgunned on it or not. You know, but I agree, if I'm traveling like 1,000 miles and taking a few days, there's no freaking way. Yeah.
That's the thing. It's like,
go ahead, James. No, I still
what I was going to say is, it's like when we went to Europa, like I wasn't a big fan of those events. You know, they weren't events that I even trained, but I was like, well, it's here. It's right in Charlotte. It's downtown. It's 20 minutes from my house.
Yeah.
Of course I'm going to go. Yeah. You know what I mean? So we went, but like, I mean, and even like, well, I mean, I shouldn't even say that. When I went out to John McCarter's event that year, you know, I wasn't too big on a couple of those events, but it was like, who cares? I'll drive out to Missouri and play with JT's flamethrower and, you know.
Sure.
Just have a good time and drink some beers. And, you know, I mean, that's how I was looking at that. But you know, sure. I mean, if I'm going to travel to an event, I want to like the different events.
Yeah.
You know, I want to like the different lifts. So, and I want them to be lifts that I would even consider training for. Like, you know, if I see the moon top or the stub, you know, I'm sorry. But, I mean, I love you and I wish you the best for your event, but I'm not coming.
Well, that's how dare you say anything bad about the good goddamn name of the stub, James Retarides.
Well, I'm sorry. I know it's a fan favorite, Jedd. It's
been great having you on our show. You've been an excellent contributor, and consider our ties severed now. Just like tissue on your index finger after training the stub.
Yeah. In talking about the King Kong events here, quick, personally, guys, I was actually hoping to see the moon top back.
I'd rather see the moon top than the shallow hub. I'll tell you that right now.
I liked it, actually. I was really fond of it. I was hoping to see a return of that one. But the stub, I never care if I see it again. But the moon top, though, that was fun. Even the guys that were here didn't hate it that I could hear.
Fond isn't necessarily the word I'd use for the moon top. There's a level of preference that exists in this dojo, and the fond side is not where I would put the moon top. It's definitely further over on the fond side than the shallow hub. I'll tell you, I was, James made up the point that, like, when he sees 2 3/8 axle, and then then he starts, like, gradually decreasing the distance he wants to drive. When I saw the shallow hub, I immediately said, if I cannot get 50 pounds on that the first time I try it, I'm not going to do King Kong, because it's just not worth It's not worth taking all that time training for that event to bring it up to where everybody else already is. 6 months before the contest is even going on, or whatever, 8 months.
You can't have Nigel Blackburn out lifting you on that thing.
Yeah, Nigel.
He was north of 55 already, wasn't he?
I saw that the other day. Was that a dub hub, right, that he did it? That
was a competition apparatus.
Yeah. That's the implement, James. It's not the David Horn World of Grip. It's the dub hub, shallow hub. So, yeah.
That's a beastly number. He's going to win.
It really is. Well, and part of that is that the hub is what I got hurt on so bad in 2017, I guess, is when I hurt my finger on. So that's a big influencer in my decisions. Is whether or not I might end up injuring my index finger again. Because
if it's worth going for.
Training on something for 8 months. That's a lot of, what is it, the Heineck triangle or whatever, Alan? The more my wife could say.
The more you do something, the more likely you are to get injured at it, or something like
exactly.
that. You run a higher risk. Yep.
Yeah, the Heineck triangle. So, that's what I'm facing in that decision-making process, is whether I want to take the chance of injuring my because I've injured the pulleys on both index fingers, I think 2 times each hand. So
well, there's no rule that says that has to heal. At some point you could snap something that isn't going to get better. So
that's a great point. Yep. Yeah. So
and they take forever, those pulleys.
Yeah. So, well, guys, it's 1:30. So we've been doing this for over an hour now.
We went a while.
But we got into it, and I didn't say it right away, but we welcome feedback from everybody else. We can treat this YouTube channel and this video as a discussion area for the Lockout versus Crossbar event, and I invite everybody to leave a comment with their opinion down below. Certainly our opinions are not the only ones. So if anyone else has an opinion they want to share, go ahead and leave it in the comment section below. Even you, Tommy Jennings, go ahead and leave a comment there.
Yay, verily.
Yep. Can't wait to hear what he has to say. So.
Was there anything else you wanted to cover, guys, or should we go ahead and wrap it up?
Well, I just wanted to throw a couple of things out there just because I thought they were interesting that they happened. I saw Devin Lee Brown and Ricardo Magni asserted on Crush to Dust.
Yes. Congratulations, guys.
Yeah. Also, Rob Vigent Jr. Was doing plate wrist curls with a 50-pound standard plate that was smooth on both sides. That was a pretty interesting feat that looked pretty amazing, almost scary. And then Lane Snook going 250 pounds on a 2.5-inch crusher. Another crazy feat, because that is considerably above the world record. And also, I believe Andrew Pankey, the maker of the Crusher himself, had said he never thought that he'd see somebody get to that number. So great, incredible feats this week from those guys.
Yeah, major milestones and impressive feats, no doubt about it.
Yep, that Crusher thing was insane.
Yeah.
Yep. All right.
Well, cool. Well, unless anybody else got anything else to add, Alan, why don't you take the show over, brother?
All right. Well, that's it for episode 85 of This Week in Grip. Thanks for listening, everybody. Make sure you comment down below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe, and we'll see you next week with another one.